So I'm calling the next meeting to order.
And no one's leaving.
We're locking the door.
Adjourns.
Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Okay. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve 2 sets of minutes as listed on the agenda, December 7th, February 9.
Do you want to split it up? Because I wasn't here for this.
Okay, we're just gonna go December 7, 22. You want to make that motion? Which one were you not at?
I was at 7.
You were at 7, so go ahead. Make a motion.
I wasn't at 7. Sorry. I meant-
Make a motion, Tammy.
Okay, I move we approve the minutes of
Thank
December
you.
7th.
I'll second it. Any comment, discussion? In favor, say aye. Aye, passes 2-0. 1 abstain. How about February 9, 23?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Second by me. Any discussion? Corrections or conditions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, there you go. Bond financing, the moment we've been waiting for.
All right,
I always look to Erica. Eric always looks to somebody and somebody looks to
I'm
somebody.
looking to Candace. to get
Pretty
it
soon, oh, there's Candace.
hi, everyone.
I see
Thank you.
Candace to look to. Hi, Candace.
Just up on the screen. Welcome, everyone. I'm super happy that we're able to kind of walk through some financing options for the district as it relates to our Series A issuance. And so I've got the dream team in the room and some actually still on this phone call too, who have dialed in to listen into. So if everyone's okay, we're just going to kind of jump in and then do introductions. Next slide.
Okay.
All right, y'all know me, so I'm going to let the folks in the room introduce themselves.
I don't know if I should stand up, but I will. Hi, everyone. My name is Mauricio Salazar. I am an associate with North Monroe's Fulbright. We serve as your bond counsel and disclosure.
And I'm Rachel Chen-Koi here from Gilman Rowlapp Associates, or PCC as your municipal advisor.
Tammy Silver, trustee.
That was just gonna be us.
We all- Your picture's not up there, Tammy. Go ahead, Candace. Yeah.
Everybody knows it. Yeah, so I'm Prentice Wright. I'm Raymond James. We are your bond underwriter.
All right, next slide, please. All right, so we're going to run through some pretty meaty details as it relates to our financing options. So please, at any point, feel free to stop and pause, ask questions as they come to you as we get through slides. So each of us will pause for a moment, make sure that if you don't have any questions, then we'll continue on. So we're going to do a quick intro section, talk a little bit about the bond election updates, our Series A GO bonds, and then sort of the next steps for the process as a whole. Next step. All right, so as a quick reminder, always we like to ground and sort of benchmark and give an overview of where we've been. So we all know that in order to meet our facilities needs and the needs of our 10-year facilities master plan, the Board of Trustees unanimously approved a general obligation bond on our November 8th ballot, which then received 70% affirmative votes authorizing PCC to issue $565 million in GO bonds. The estimated annual tax rate is about $20 per 100,000 of assessed value. And since we've had that election, what we did first is we held a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee study session in December. We then certified the election results in January. And then now we've started, this team has been meeting regularly to plan for our Series A issuance. Next slide. All right, just as a quick reminder in terms of the projects that we hope to cover with this issuance, or maybe of the Measure PCC as a whole. I don't want to say just the first Series A issuance. We've got several really important utilities upgrades, power distribution, health, life safety pieces that'll be used, that we will use bond funding for. You may recall that we are going to pay off our COP using bond funds. We have a new student services building that we're looking to build, some renovations of our pool, a new STEM building, which will be right next to the Serafian building, some technology modernization and infrastructure work across campus, a new academic building, and some new sort of outdoor plaza sort of / outdoor learning spaces. Those sort of pieces all fit this $565 million issuance. So those are our pieces. We're starting to just sort of put the puzzle together in terms of how we're going to start executing on those plans and what order in which the operations will take place. We'll be convening a work group on campus that'll help us do some prioritization. We're looking at spatialization, going to be working with instruction side of the house to figure out how those plans work with the way in which they schedule classes. So lots of work is happening in addition to sort of our planning pieces around how we structure the first issuance.
Candace, can you comment on the footnotes 1 and 2 and how the footnotes may or may not move into boxes?
Sure. So the first, the groupings, right, that you see in front of you relate based on the facilities master plan. So these pieces are all designated or have been described in that 800-page document. So we wanted to make sure that the project grouping and how we go about will eventually go to the board for approval. So these are just sort of how we imagine that. But as we get into the bond work groups and make some decisions about how we move through the program, we'll bring that to the board. The second piece is we were always very intentional about if the district needs to enter into negotiations on real property, or we would like to acquire additional property or land, that the bond language included language that would allow us to do that. So again, any satellite campus concepts or any need for the district to purchase property is also included with the bond language. All right, next slide.
I have a question.
Of course.
We lost your picture, first of all.
I put it right there, so it's more on the screen.
Also, where is the refurbishment of the R building? I think that's it. Where would that be?
Yeah, those, well, they're also included in our language. What we call those are more of our modernization projects. They're not necessarily described. There are more things that we can do with bond funding that are not necessarily in these boxes. But refurbishing both the E building, C building, modernizing some seismic retrofits for E, modernization of the C building and the R building are all included as a part of the full plan, and we're included in our bond language.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. All right, so then we have some election updates, and I'll have my colleagues in the room share.
Great, thank you, Candace. So we thought we would start with a recap or some of our observations coming out of the November 2021 election. I would like to start this recap with the fact that our 70% approval rate is something truly to be proud of, because looking at the results for all of the key 14 districts that put AGO bond ballot measure on the November ballot, but just to start from the top bullet point, there were a total of 100 GO bond ballot measures on the ballot up and down the state here in California. Wide range of bond authorization, but total over 22.6 billion. There were also 7 parcel taxes on the ballot. All 100 of them are Prop 39 ballot measures. Those require 55% of voter support to pass, similar to Measure PCC. And end of the day, 72% of these measures passed, roughly total to $20 billion of authorization approved by voters. However, at election night, I think only 60% of them were able to call victory. So I think we were able to do that in election night, which was remarkable. On the chart below, we put this election result of November 22, right next to the historical averages. So 72% of Prop 39 bonds who focus on the first bar, that's lower than the historical average of 80% of these bonds passing. There are no questions. I'm going to do the next slide. Same election results, but we put it into different categories. The top chart is the election results by region. You can see how many were put on the ballot and how many passed in NorCal, Bay Area, Central Valley, as compared to Southern California here. We also put the election results categorized by district type, elementary, high, unified, and focusing on the community college districts. There were a total of 8 ballot measures and 7 of them passed, including Measure PCC. Again, I think that the success of Measure PCC is a tremendous success and really speak to the thoughtful and transparent process that the board took. With that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Salazar to start the Series A Geo Bond section.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again. In the beginning, I failed to mention that my colleagues Ann Lombardi and Laura Parker, I think still on the line, but they're with us virtually. But I'll go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the framework or the legal framework for a general obligation bond. This slide you have here in front of you, starting on the left-hand side, bondholders. So your underwriter will go ahead and sell the first series of bonds to underwriters, to bondholders, investors. Proceeds of the sale of those bonds will be deposited with the county, certain accounts held for the district. The district can thereafter dip into or draw down from those accounts in order to build projects that were approved by the project, under the project list for the bond measure. Each year the bonds are outstanding, the county will go ahead and levy taxes on PCC district eligible properties and in turn, those proceeds will be deposited with the county and used in order to pay the bondholders. So each year the bonds are outstanding, the county will be legally obligated to do so. Next slide.
So my only question on that side is why is there an arrow on the end next to PCC taxpayers? It's a very moot point. Don't worry about it. It seems like that would be a dot because
I think that one we were trying to represent graphically that the county levies the taxes and then the
all right.
taxpayers
Thank
pay
you.
the ad
Okay,
valorem.
that's fine. I get it.
And while we're on this slide, one thing I would add is that this particular legal mechanism for geo bonds, which is the same for all 14 districts in the state, the money does not go to the district. It goes directly from taxpayer to the county to the bondholder.
So this next slide is a list of some of the legal documents that are related to a GO bond series. The first of which is the district resolution, which generally authorizes one or more series of bonds on. Yes,
I'm just thinking about what you just said, so the money doesn't come through PCC, so how are the bills paid?
the county is legally obligated to collect those. So they levy the taxes on the tax roll, collect those proceeds from district eligible properties, and then just turn around and go ahead and pay the bondholders when due.
Oh, I'm talking about the construction bills.
Oh, well, the construction bills, that's with the, so in the middle column there, the district PCC will request or draw down the proceeds from the county. So it's a separate, they'll draw down and pay and use those funds in order to pay for the bills. Okay. Yeah. This next slide goes over some of the legal documents, first of which is the district resolution, which authorizes, like I mentioned, the series of bonds under the measure. It also lists specific financing terms, security provisions, how the flow of funds will really occur, which accounts will be deposited with the county, And other details, including just appointing district officials to actually do anything and everything to issue, the bond. Next to that, the county resolution really does two main things, one of which is authorizing the district series of bonds. And number two is what we just mentioned, directing county staff to levy the taxes on the tax roll each year for when the bonds are outstanding. And they do that in a sufficient amount to pay for the bonds, the principal and interest. So there's no worry on that end. The county kind of handles all of that, yes.
What percentage fee does the county get for handling this?
I can answer that question. So the county actually does not assess a separate fee for handling our bond. They charge us a percentage fee in total just to contract with them to process all of our businesses.
What's their service fee? Just for curiosity. You don't have to answer that right now, but.
Yeah, it's in the 6 digits every year. Yeah.
So next in line there is the bond purchase agreement, or BPA for short. It's the agreement the district enters into with the underwriter, with Prentice's firm, and it basically outlines the terms of purchase of the bond. It will further specify certain deliverables, certain certificates and opinions that will be delivered. This is a document that will also be introduced at the time the district resolution is presented to the board. It will include certain blanks, of which will be filled in once the bonds are priced. And that's pretty much it on that one. The next slide, or the next column there under the official statements. So the preliminary official statement is really a big, thick book. Talks about the terms of the bonds, the mechanisms, but it speaks to an in-depth analysis on the district's finances, the district's demographics, really anything that a reasonable investor would like to know about the district. The underwriter goes ahead and uses this document to sell the bonds to investors. Again, this document is presented at the time of district resolution with certain blanks. Those blanks will be filled in with final pricing information. Once it's final, once the bonds have been priced, that document is then converted to what we call a final official statement. It drops that preliminary. And lastly, there under the
Go ahead.
Lastly, under the column there is continuing disclosure undertaking. It's a document that under securities laws is really required for Prentice's firm to go ahead and sell these bonds to investors. It's a document, it's an obligation that the district is entering into, that each year that bonds are outstanding, the district will disseminate or publish certain district information that a reasonable investor would like to know of. This document is also an appendix to the preliminary official statement and the final official statement, so investors know what is annually expected. In addition to annually reporting that, there's certain listed events that need to be reported within 10 calendar days of if it's occurring. One of which is a rating change on the district's bonds, or if the district's bonds are insured, there's a rating change on the insurance level. But there's a certain list that needs to be done, which is usually completed. But that rounds out the preliminary legal documents that are related to general obligation bonds. I think there was.
Yeah, well, who writes the bond purchase agreement? You do.
Yeah, bond. Yes.
And then who writes the big thick book that the potential investors get
So
to?
our office does as well.
You do that?
As disclosure. Yes. And we work in combination with Trent's office, and Rachel's office as well, in putting that all together.
So they have two roles, bond counsel, right, to opine on the tax exemption of the bonds. They have disclosure counsel, which is a separate role, which is just dealing with that document.
How many of these things touch us? Or have to come through us in order to go out there? I mean, obviously, a district resolution and I'm assuming the county resolution is not ours, but the latter three things, how many of those?
They will be presented at the time the district resolution is presented.
Oh, they're supposed to connect it.
Yeah, they're connected, and there will be forms of the documents, but again, they won't be finalized because the bond has not been priced or sold yet. But many of those blanks will be near final form. But once the bonds are priced, those blanks will be filled in and completed.
So on the resolutions, the district and the county, who's kind of like, who runs point on dealing with the county, or I assume writing the resolution, your office does. So that's just you working with the team, but dealing with the county, who's our point?
Trustee Martin, as your financial advisor, we help facilitate through the timeline and the different milestone events, and what we would help in working with the team, different team members to work with the county as well. And we have reached out to the county to set a preliminary date based on our current schedule to make sure that is, all the documents are provided to the county for them to consider that resolution.
Are you,
I think I heard you are,
Yes.
okay.
are you worried about getting their approval? Is that what you're worried?
No, I'm just curious in the process, as with anything, there's somebody, and usually it comes down to somebody who is like, why haven't we got the email back yet? Or why haven't they done this? We sent this to you a week ago. Where is it? Boom, boom, boom. Somebody is shepherding the deal. And when you're dealing with a county, I'm thinking like you need somebody shepherding the deal. Colin, that's you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And what is it like dealing with LA County to get this done?
So, in short, LA County is definitely one of the more involved county when it comes to, districts' geo financings. They like to be informed. For example, Candace and the team have provided them our preliminary schedule, so they understand what PCC may be looking at. We have reached out for communication. So they will be invited to participate on your bond pricing when we get closer to that. So there's a lot of touch points and interactions with them. Some counties in the state, they don't want any part of that. So LA County is, certainly more involved. And it's specifically the treasurer tax collector's office being involved. But the resolution is being considered by the board of supervisors.
So how long can you expect from the time we need the money and ask for it until we get it?
That's a great question that I think in the issuance process, we certainly try to back into the timeline to deliver you the proceeds, because county needs lead time after you approve the district resolution and the DACA documents. That then gets submitted to the county to be considered. So there's a agenda preparation timeline. But then after the proceeds and the requisition of the proceed, how much time that takes, I'm not personally involved. Maybe.
Yeah, usually they, what is the beauty of it, the county handles the debt service payment. So they set up a different house for help us with that. As far as us drawing down the money to help pay for construction, we usually work with a trust account within the commercial bank. So the proceeds from selling the bond gets deposited in the trust account, and then we draw from that account and not having to go to the account. Thank you. Make it much easier.
Yeah.
There's no other questions. Let's move on to the next slide.
I'm sorry, so I kind of cut you off right as you were getting to continuing disclosure undertaking. Did you talk about that?
Yes, I did. It's
Okay.
it's a document that's pretty much legally obligated, per securities laws for Trinitas, to go ahead and sell the bonds, but it's an obligation the district is entering into, a contractual obligation that each year when the bonds are outstanding, the district will publish an annual report with certain listed information, which is really just updating what's what will be included in the preliminary official statement, the big document. But it will be updated annually each year, to keep investors apprised, its level of transparency, et cetera.
So the biggest part of it is your audit, right? You have, that's the biggest part of it. But then there are tables like, you know, top 20 taxpayers in your district, right? These bonds are supported by assessed value. Who are those people? Right? So people, investors want to know if there's a major change, like in Long Beach, when BMW moved out of Long Beach, right? That was a big change for them to file a notice for and say, hey, this taxpayer is selling their property. They're not, someone's taking it over, but this taxpayer is leaving. And so that's sort of thing. It's all the time. All right. Here comes the fun part. All right, so I'm gonna get up and walk you through these slides because they're graphs and they can be a little tricky to follow if I'm doing this. So this first couple of acronyms, as in finance, like IT, right? There's acronyms abound. So MMD is the first acronym that you should get familiar with the next several slides. MMD stands for municipal market data. Okay, what that is in my line of work, there is a benchmark rate for all interest rates set for bonds that are sold on a tax-exempt basis. Okay. That benchmark is called MMD. Now that MMD goes from years 1 individually all the way to years 30, and it's set every day at noon. So unlike the treasury market or the stock market, which you see prices are quoted every second, right? In my line of work, there's like a read in the morning around maybe 8 or 9, 10, and then but the official MMD number doesn't come out till noon. That's your benchmark for the pricing of all tax-exempt bonds. Okay, that's the first acronym. Second acronym we use a whole lot here is BPS. What is that? The BPS, using mortgage finance as well, is basis points. The BPS equals basis points. What's a basis point? Well, think of a basis point as 100 basis points is 1%, right? So therefore, 1 basis point is 0.01. Okay. It's riddled with acronyms to make sure that okay. So this graph is a graph of just the 30-year rate for tax-exempt bonds, right? 30-year MMD from starting in January of last year till now. Okay. And the biggest thing is everybody reads the paper, and people, whatever their phones, you read their phones, none of them reads the paper anymore, right? Is interest rates to be going up because the Fed, or the FOMC committee really, has been changing the short-term rate since they got hardcore about it in early 2022. But they have upped that rate. That's what those little purple circles you see are. They've upped that rate a total of 450 basis points, so 4.5%, just since January of 2022, and that was 8 individual times. The next meeting, I think, is March 22nd, and I think up until July 26th, I think it is, there's 4 meetings starting March 22nd. But by the time we sell bonds, it's probably going to be 3 or 4 meetings in advance of that. Okay. So they've said, if we sell paper today, last week it was, hey, we're going to try to moderate this thing and increase that rate 25 basis points, or sorry, the 25 basis points every time we meet. This morning it was, hey, we're going to do whatever it takes to get inflation under control. That's why the stock market sold off. That's why treasury rates went up. It's just today. Okay. So this is very real. But what's interesting, right, is if as of last year it was 150, now it's around 350. This is your tax-exempt benchmark. It did go up 4.5%. It went up 2%, which is what we're saying here. That it went up. Fed fund went up 4.50 basis points. 30-year MMD only 200. Okay, and because if I'm borrowing money, I want to know, hang on, is this thing getting out of control on? And I would say in the long term, no. And we'll show you why in a second. Is that clear? We want to move along. Okay, next slide, please. This one's a bit of a mess, but it tells really supply and demand slide, right? So up here, this is issuance volume by year for the last 3 years plus what's happened just in really January. And as you can see, really from the light turquoise numbers from what, September through December, right? Last year, issuance volume pretty low. January still pretty low compared to prior years, right? January 23. We don't have February's number. We had turned this in before it was available, but it's about the same trend. right? So supply wise, not a lot of supply, which if you're a borrower, it's probably good, right? Because that means the demand is still there and you're bringing supply, right? In a light supply market. That's in your favor, right? So then you look at demand and say, okay, what's going on in demand? So now this is tricky because all these green bars are funds going into bond funds like Oppenheimer, Fidelity, right? Names you've probably heard, okay? Bond fund, right? But there's 8 different types of investor, that is one, okay? People hear rates are going up and they get their statements in the mail, right? Because the bond prices, right, are inverse to rates. When rates go up, if I bought bonds at 100 cents on the dollar and rates go up 1%, that bond's probably worth 90 cents on the dollar after that, okay? Truly, that's true. But when people get their statements, they start pulling money out of bond funds. That's what these red bars are. Okay? So that's helped or been part of the reason that rates and tax market have gone up, which you saw in the previous slide. But the big thing has been the Fed. Okay? We can't stop either of those, right? There's another trend in the municipal market, which is why I'm not too concerned about this, is because, yeah, bond funds, their role in my market, or our market now, is getting smaller. But what's called professional retail, separate management accounts, it's just people putting money with professional investors that they give them discretion to invest. That's been the biggest trend. That's the biggest rising. We don't have that number. They will publish that number separately, but that number's been rising. Okay? That type of investor. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
Wait, the blue line is the money
Which one?
people.
On this slide?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the blue line is remember I said MMD, the previous slide was the 30-year rate for the MMD, which is the benchmark rate. This is the 10-year. So this is to show you, hey, when, let's say COVID, which is the best example, right? When COVID hit, what happened? Well, 10-year MMD shot up because everyone's pulling money out, right? And usually you would think that would be, right, correlated, inversely related. But all that sounds like, whoa, 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 what are we getting into here with selling this, right? Next slide. So this graph, bond borrowing money, is the one I want to see. Because what it tells me is, we'll stick to the 30-year rate, okay? That's when we gave you the graph. Look in the far end. Those blue bars, this blue bar here, is the range of the 30, just the 30-year rate for the last 30 years. And this table tells you what it was. So the low was 127, right here. The high for the last 30 years has been 695, which is way up there. But the average for the last 30 years has been 416, which is here. And that's what this dark blue line represents is for every single year is what's the average been of those individual rates for the last 30 years, okay? The red line represents where those rates are now. So I can tell you, hand over heart, 30-year, pretty much every rate up until about here, the 5 or 6 year rate, the current rates are 50 basis points roughly, 30 to 50 basis points lower than the 30-year average. And they're definitely well below the highs, right? Because the high is way up here for every one of these rates. We're down here. The bond borrowing money, that's what I would want to know is, hey, man, it seems like rates have gone, all I hear about the paper is rates going up. All I hear on the phones is rates going up, right? Well, that's true, as you saw in the first graph you saw. But if you put it in perspective, you say, well, where are we in the scale of things? And look at this, that look too bad. Why did we pick 93? Well, you're transgraduated college for one. And 2 is 30 years on the dot, right? So yeah, that's our story. So if I'm borrowing, like I said, if this red line was way up here, right, and tracking the top of these blue bars, yeah, I'd be a little worried about borrowing money now, but it's way down here. And you say, how bad can this get? Well, way up here is how bad it can get. And we're still in a pretty decent spot, right? Overall, we'll show you the rates as we go through this presentation of what we think the cost of money is now. But I don't want to spoil it for now. Put it in time. Any questions about any of that? Yes, ma'am.
So you're saying that last year is year 30.
Yeah, so this is our 30-year rate, isn't it?
So somebody issued bonds and had to pay out 6.95% to get people to buy them.
So remember, that was 6.95 is the benchmark rate. That's for a AAA rate. You guys are AA plus. So they paid a little more than that at that point.
So in order to sell their bonds, they had to offer like
7%. So,
7.
so I imagine that was about April of 94, May of 94. I
Oh,
just entered the business and it was a horrible year to get into the business.
that wasn't last year.
No, man, no, man, that was a long time ago. No, it was, I don't know what it was. I can find out if you want, but it was a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, like saying, putting in perspective is, how bad can it get? Right now, our rate is 356. Our
So to
benchmark
put
rate.
her question in reverse,
Yeah.
she should look at the other end of the chart under 1. And last year, somebody paid,
No, it's not
issued at 4.95.
last year.
Is that one?
Within the
No.
last year,
No, man, no, so this isn't 30 years of history.
Oh,
This is individual rates, because remember, MMB has a rate for every single year, 1 through 30. So what I mean by that is, in year 1, right now, if you want to borrow money at AAA rates, if you can borrow the MMB rates, your rate would be, where this red thing is, would be 3.03. Right? Just to borrow money for 1 year. If you had to borrow money for 30 years, and all you're gonna do is borrow money for 30 years, your rate would be 356. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
We didn't understand what we were looking at.
Yeah, well, so I tried to, because it said maturity, which means these are each individual years. When you put numbers on up and it's a big table, I've been through that is way worse to explain. I thought the graph might help, but maybe my pencil neckish is stretching a little too far.
it's good.
Any other questions before we move along? But I really want to understand it, because like I said, all we hear in the news is rates are going up, and they are. However, in perspective, they could get a lot worse than they are now.
So why would a borrower, why would an investor get a 30-year bond today?
Why would they buy today instead of waiting a year?
Hmm.
Right, good question. So bond funds, right, they operate by an indenture. They get $1 in, they can't wait the year. But they've got to put that money to work, really, I think it's within 2 weeks. Right, so they can't wait the year. So they buy now, and remember, they're all benchmarked against each other. If you think of all the bond funds there are in the country, they're benchmarked on what's called the Lipper average. So whatever that, so let's say that return in a year is 4%. Well, they're all benchmarked against that, because that, if you earn 3, then yeah, you got a problem if you're a fund manager. But if you earn close to that market, your job's safe. Right? They have to put that money to work, and they're all benchmarked against this thing. It's like stock guys, right? Well, stock guys wait a year and see what happens. Well, because they got to put that money to work now. They have to take the risk on their behalf, but they still have to take the risk. But if you're asking me for investment advice, and so should I wait a year? Should I wait a year to invest my money? I'd say probably wait until August, but I wouldn't wait longer than that. I know it's a tricky thing to go through. But I want you to understand, with $565 million bonds to sell, I want you guys to understand some of this, that in the perspective is, you might have somebody come to you and say, hey, why are you guys borrowing money now? I have a resident account, why are you doing this now? Show them this. Just show them that last bar. Say, look, this is the range, high to low where rates are at. This is where we're at now. This is the 30-year average. We're 50 basis points below the 30-year average. That doesn't sound that expensive. I know it's expensive because it used to be 1.5, but those days are long. Okay. Any other questions on this? Anyone? No? If you have any questions, please let us know. Okay. Turn it over back to you.
So here we have on this slide, is your credit rating, that's your order rating as it currently stands. For the Series A bonds, we will be going up to both S&P Global Ratings and Moody's Investor Service to get an update, but new ratings assigned for this new series of bonds. Like here you are for your geos, they're highly rated at AA+ and AA1. We are currently preparing for that process and coordinating with the rating agencies. We're not expecting, based on what we know, any significant changes to what you're seeing on this slide, but we thought it's important to bring that back to you because similar to a person's credit score, higher your credit rating, lower your borrowing costs. Yes.
So this is based on the ability of our community to pay these bonds, right?
I wish that that would be the true assessment, but the rating agencies, they publish a wide range of rating criteria for different type of financing, different revenue back and general obligation bonds included. They, for geo bonds, look at a wide range of things. So tax base, right? That's your community. That's what's repaying the Series A bonds. It's one component of it. They also look to the district's finances, your management, as well as a lot of other things surrounding income, the regional economy. So they weigh those factors differently, but that's the process where the team is currently undertaking, is to prepare a presentation that's targeted to address each of those rating categories to make sure we can help tell the story that PCC is worth the high credit ratings that you found.
Are there any community colleges with the very top ratings?
Yes, there's a handful of CCDs in California that are AAA rated. I would say most of those, except one, are those are community funded CCDs. So their funding is mainly coming from property taxes and not enrollment and or attendance. So those are reviewed more favorably by
California?
Yeah, so you got like South Orange County Community College District. They're supported by just the property taxes in the local area. There's the Lion State coming. Yeah.
South Orange.
Maricosta,
Maricosta, College
West
of
Valley.
Marin,
Yep, yeah.
West
Napa
Marin,
now is,
Napa.
so it's like 8 or 9, I think.
Yeah, they get more money from taxes than they would get from the chancellor's office, so they just get the taxes, so they get all the money they have coming to them. So that's called a basic aid district.
Yeah, so the revenue is not driven by enrollment or the student center funding pool.
South
So
Orange,
that's like a K-12 district.
some of the K-12 districts
Are that way.
are that way too.
Yeah, most of do a lot of areas that have high property tax rates.
That's right, coastal, that they can expect more property taxes than what they will receive due to enrollment or attendance.
Just have you detected, so those of us that are not basic aid get obviously a large portion from the state. And the general demographics in California is that I'm not saying anything I'm sure you don't know, where our demographics aren't supporting the amount of funding they're giving us, but we're in a hold harmless. So it seems to me if I was a bond, if I was Moody's or S&P, or I was a bond borrower, the potential of what could happen to a district in the post hold harmless era would concern me and impact my rating. And yet you've got us at least boxed at AA+. I don't know if you boxed us there because that's what we were last time,
That's
or
what your outstanding geo bonds are currently.
that's where they are. So what am I missing? Why is it these rating agencies aren't concerned about the potential cataclysmic event of either the end of hold harmless for community college specifically, or the massive liability of STRs and PERS that are being put on local districts, and we're still getting these incredibly high ratings?
Those are all great points, and I think in short, I believe the rating agencies are on the lookout for those. So rating agencies, when they assess your credit rating, they look at trends, both historical as well as projected trends. So that's all a part of their assessment. But that's why they also look to management, right? How the district and its management has managed past budgetary pressures as well as how they plan to do so. Your multi-year projection is one of those. Nevertheless, to take a step back, and that's something I know Trennis and I always argue with the rating agencies, is the district's general fund is not repaying these GO bonds. It's the property taxes that the county has the obligation per all the legal procedures to levy whatever that's needed to repay the bonds. These GOs should be rated AAA, right? Because there's never going to be a default if the county is obligated to levy the taxes to repay them. But the rating agencies still believe they should look at these other factors, and that's why we're preparing this rating presentation, working with the president's office as well as Jesse and Candace to help tell the story, to help tell the rating agencies how PCC will be well positioned when those pressures do come in the future.
So I would say to your response, again, that the first answer you gave about management and all this kind of stuff is I don't know how to say it. You can have the greatest management in the world and it isn't going to answer number two. You could have, but if you have poor management, you could be in trouble with or without the problem of number two. So the first answer on good management, all that, basically just gets you to the second level. Because if you don't pass the first level, you can't get to the second level. Once at the second level, your answer is that basically it comes down to property tax. It doesn't matter. As long as the district isn't throwing it away or fraudulently, doing something ridiculous, it's going to come down to the property tax. So the big concern isn't these things. The big concern is real estate values in California.
That's one of the big factors that the rating agencies look at. Your asset valuation, your value per capita, your debt outstanding per capita.
So you might have seen a shift with this last proposition where people can transfer their property taxes across counties in the state or something. It seems to me that would diminish the future potential of property increases. That might have an impact on some of this a little bit, but it's probably pretty minor in the cosmos.
Yes, so there are a lot of different factors, which if we don't have questions on the credit rating, I have a slide on.
Okay, well, I'll let it go, but I'm just trying to really see how it all really works. And, short of the big one, because that will have an impact.
Yeah, does our putting money away for future pension obligations reflect a better credit rating?
Yes, that's the short answer, and that's one of the things we highlight to the rating agencies, that you have a trust set aside to help offset future pension liabilities.
It helps with number one, so you can get to number two.
So on the next slide here is a table and a graphical explanation of your historical assessed valuation. That's all of the properties within PCC's boundary and where they have been assessed by the county of LA. Keep in mind, these are assessed valuation, they're not market value. And then I boxed the 2023, that's the latest set of numbers that came out this past summer. And you're looking at over 108 billion or 5.76% of the annual growth. So first of all, good news, because when we were planning for Measure PCC, our modeling assumed 3% of AV growth. So certainly we want to have conservative assumptions, and AV assumption is a big part of it. And looking at your historical trends, right? All those annual growth, and we slice and dice them to look at different time period, 5, 20, 25, 26 year. What you will see is the historical average is roughly 5 to 6%. But we also want to acknowledge the fact that it would be much easier for a $26 billion tax base to grow by 5% than a $108 billion. It takes a lot more development, it would take a lot more property exchange in a, increasing value real estate market. So that's why we have, always assumed a conservative 3% assessed valuation growth for the PCC, Metro PCC program, including the Series A bond issuance. So
the current drop in real estate values that are being experienced won't probably get recognized till summer.
So, great question. There, you always see a lag in how the market is reflected in your assessed value, because these assessed values are set by the county in January every year. So the values you're looking at right now for 2023, they were set in January of 2023. In January of 2022, I'm sorry.
The 23 was January 22.
Yes, so these are fiscal year ending, so it represents 2022-23 tax year, and those are set in January of 22.
John, the buffer is, this is a set value, not market value.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, so that's not gonna be as impacted.
And you've got the 2%, Prop 13,
Right.
right, guarantee, so it's out of the 3%, 2% of that is literally gimme. Right?
Oh.
So,
And lastly, to round out the slide, the tables below, this is the calculation based on the 22-23 AV of PCC's statutory bonding capacity. So that's 2.5% for CCDs, and that's applied to your total assessed valuation. So that's how the 2.7 gross statutory bonding capacity is calculated, and you need to take out any outstanding GOs. So we're looking at, we're not running any issues into bonding capacity, because the 2.6 net statutory bonding capacity is well above and beyond the measure PCC 565 authorization.
All right, the outstanding part, that's the outstanding due bonds.
Correct. Measure P,
Our bonding capacity $2.6 billion.
Mhm.
that is correct. So this is a calculation, a snapshot in time, because as your assessed valuation change, as you repay bonds, issue new bonds, or refinance bonds, these numbers will shift. But sitting here right now, before issuing Series A, that is 2.6 billion. All right, I don't want to scare people by standing up, but you are looking at a lot of numbers here, so I want to be close to the screen to make sure I'm looking at the same numbers as you do. So again, a lot of numbers on this slide, but what we wanted to do is to share with you some of the important bond statistics for as we plan for Series A bond issuance. There's different ways of structuring bonds, as you can imagine. One of the ways to look at it is the overall bond term, right? So the first scenario here we're showing you is all the statistics related to a 25-year maximum bond term. That's a very conservative approach, and we started there because that was the assumption we made when planning for Measure PCC, because that's the most conservative, understanding that your legal maximum for bond term or the overall bond maturity is 40 years. So the other way to look at the bond term and why it's important is because similar to mortgages, right? 30-year mortgage, the interest cost would be overall more expensive than a 15-year mortgage. So shorter the term, shorter the interest cost. But it's also important to look at in today's market, what those bond interest costs or other statistics stack up looking at different options. So we prepared two sets of options. I'll start with this one. I won't read all the numbers, but on the upper left-hand chart, you see the sources and uses of funds. Working with Candace and Jesse and the staff, we understand that we are targeting $130 million for the Series A bond issuance. And bond premium is a function of the market, but I want to focus on the uses of funds. After repaying COPs, which is roughly $28 million, you're looking at roughly $101 million for projects. On the right-hand side is summary bond statistics when the bonds are issued, the one line.
I'm sorry, could you
No
repeat that? that last sentence you just said before, one more time.
No problem. So after repaying the COP, which is 28 million roughly, we are expecting 101 million for
Got it.
project funding.
Thank you.
So those are to fund the projects that Candace shared on one of the prior slides.
Thank you.
No problem. The bond statistics, there's all the pertinent numbers for the board's information, but I would like to highlight. So we were asked the question, is right now the good time to issue bonds? What would the bond interest cost look like? Based on the current information, and you see a lot in that footnote, based on working with Trina's office, some of the scales we got, and then we added some cushion, right? There's 4 more FOMC meetings. We added 100 basis points to the rates in today's market or market as of February 7th. Overall, we're estimating Series A's true interest cost, TIC, to be roughly 4.5%. So on the chart here is the Series A projected tax rate. What you can see is we are living under the tax rate ceiling of $20 per 100,000 of assessed value. And the legal maximum is 25, but we've always estimated $20 of the tax rate for Measure PCC. So that's our ceiling that we're structuring Series A under. And you can see how the tax rate is structured for the proposed 25-year term of a Series A. And you may ask, why does it go all the way up for the first 2 years and then get lower? It's because we want to make sure we reserve tax rate capacity for future issuances. Based on current projection, that's going to happen in 2 years. So we want to make sure all of the taxing capacity in these 2 years that only Series A will be outstanding, we maximize them. Then we take it down to as low as possible. So Series B, C, D, and so on can be layered on top of it. And the final maturity based on that 25-year term is 2048. And the tax rate in that out year is roughly $4.56 per 100,000 of AB.
Sorry, just to put it in perspective, those first 2 bars, as far as how much, so you sell $130 million in bonds, those first 2 bars equate to about $40 million. Because your 80 is $100 billion. So that $20 we're going to leave you on your property taxes will wash away $40 million in 2 years. Your 80 is so large. It's the average home, median home price in this district. The average person will pay about $100 to get that for that first year.
Any questions before I move on?
I wish I understood it. But I'm not sure how to ask the question. So by explaining the drop again, I might
Yes.
understand. I get all the stuff up on the top.
Great.
I'm trying to understand. So you're saying when you issue the first 130 million or whatever,
Yes.
you're going to issue some 1 year, some 2 years, some 5 years, 25 years.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
And how does that, and based on how much you put in, how much of the 130 you put in the 1 year, 2 year versus the 30 year, is that what I'm looking at on the bars below?
That is the starting point of that. And then that goes to what Trennis was trying to explain. So the tax rate, that's used 2024 as an example, the maximum would be $20 per 100,000. So we would apply $20 per 100,000 to your total assessed valuation of 108 buildings. That gives us the debt service amount for year 1, which is repaid in.
So you can decide the total amount you're gonna pull is gonna equal 136 million, whatever. But you can decide how much of that to assess on the taxpayers at the beginning versus the end.
Correct. And maybe if I can move on to the next slide, we have a
Okay.
chart to help explain. This is what Measure PCC, when you access and issue all 565 million, the tax rate will look like. So this is just the red burgundy bar for Series A. And when we issue Series B, they will be layered on top of it. And then Series
okay,
C and
yeah.
D, but all living within projected tax rate of $20.
Okay.
Yes.
I appreciate that question. So this, I mean, obviously, this is the tax rate, so if we, so tax rate, obviously, the first year, we're doing Series A first, all that tax rate goes to Series A. And so would that mean that in 2026, where that Series A number drops, does that mean that, as you were just saying, that 40 million that has been paid back already? Or what has been borrowed is from those first 2 years, and then the remaining amount on that Series A, we will pull it out for between 26
be-
and 48.
Yes, it will be repaid in year 3, year 4,
Okay.
all the way
Okay.
to year 25.
This is referring to how we're taxing the county, the taxpayers to get the money in. And in terms of cash flow of the money going out. So the first issuance is 130 million. And when you issue it, is there effectively 130 million in the bank?
Yes.
Yes.
So municipal bonds, they're very much like a loan, right? So you issue the bonds, or you issue the loan, you borrow 130 million. So you get the full loan amount on the day we close the bonds. And what happens is we do property taxes, we pay the principal and interest payment, borrow on that 130 million over the next, in this scenario, 25 years.
At different rates and different levels. So,
Exactly.
so when PCC pulls the 130 out, based on our schedule, has nothing to do with this schedule once it's established.
That is correct.
Okay.
You get all 130 million available to you for project that they have.
Now, I thought there was some arbitrage law
Yes.
where you weren't allowed to have 130 million that you weren't gonna spend in the next, and it took you 25 years to spend, or 10 years.
Yes,
I thought you were limited to a very short period of time.
that is correct. So the general rule of thumb of that ROS rule, and Mauricio can feel free to jump in, but the rule of thumb is you have a reasonable expectation that you can spend 85% of the proceeds within 3 years. That's the reason why, based on your tax rate capacity, we can issue all $565 million today, based on the current interest cost. But can we reasonably expect to spend all 565 million within 3 years is what's limiting or the thought process behind the sequencing of your issuances.
Okay, so here now the pressure goes back on the district. Now we know where the first 28 million is going. That's, okay, got that. So then there's another 70 million. I don't know what the number is.
101 million.
Okay. I didn't mean over the 10 years. I meant over the next 3 years.
Correct, that's $101 million.
There's 101 million. Oh, you gotta spend the whole 130 within the next 3 years?
You need to spend 85%.
85% of 130 within 3 years. Okay, so I was trying to discount 85%. We'll go with 130. So, when this thing goes bang, it's almost like the district's gotta have some shovel-ready projects, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are prepping. So the way that which the team, the PCC side and the construction side, as well as with our bond financing team in the room, we sort of had a monthly spend down for the next 3 years of what we believe those funds would be. So we have a project list, and we've determined what the spend down rate would be for those projects that we would be able to meet the 85% in the 3 years. So the number that we've come up with, we feel confident with the projects that are first in the queue.
So your box number 1, I'm trying to find it back here on the very beginning of this whole deal. There we are in yellow. Utility upgrades, COP repayment, funds for Serapian building. Okay, so Serapian building, COP repayment, those are obviously shovel ready and in progress.
That's correct.
So yeah, so you then, the only other thing, but Serapian's not 100 million, or
Also,
Is
There
that?
are also things on this, so the phasing of what you're seeing here isn't indicative of the projects that will take place in Series A. It was just meant to describe the project phases that are articulated in the facilities master plan.
Okay, all right.
So
at
some of the
point-
early projects would be, for example, within the next 3 years, we will be dropping or demolishing the W building. Right? So those pieces will be, we will build into the Series A.
So when this hits the board, and I realize the timing can always slide
Yes,
on the funding, but when this hits the board and you're asking the board to approve getting 130 million that we don't want to get arbitrage on, you will be obviously showing the board a project list that says this is where the 130 million can go in the next, or 85% of it in the next 3 years.
that's correct. So we're first going to work through the bond work group at the campus level and work through some prioritizations there using spatialization data, sort of sequencing piece based on staging and getting folks and making sure that we have swing space to accommodate this. But yes, eventually those pieces will come to the board just for, like, for review. Here is the method by which we will plan these initial proceeds.
And I appreciate what you just said, excuse me. But in some ways, it's not easy. I hate to use the word easy. The easy step is to conceptualize a plan. The difficult part is implementing the plan in the proper time sequencing when you're dealing with DOA and other institutions that can slow this puppy down, right?
Mhm.
So again, having things, when I say shovel ready through DSA approved plans, boom, bang, permit, is kind of critical. So when you present these projects in awareness for the board on the authorization or I can't think of the property development term for the approval, where we are in the approval process would be
Correct.
important associated with each of those projects.
Yes, we will share out our Series A project list that will map to the 100. It'll probably be more than, to be quite honest, 130, because honestly, we're already have bond projects underway. We have architects that we are using capital funds, outlay funds to pay, that the district will be able to reimburse ourselves using those capital funds we can reimburse from eventually when we issue the bonds. So there's already money being expended. And so in January, when we approved the resolution authorized the district to reimburse itself using those future funds.
Got it. And then circling back to the original question that started this whole thing, which had nothing to do with the original question, which is our chart here. Again, you can we, the district, or you, our guidance, can set these bars wherever you wanted to set them. For this bond, you pumped years 24 and 25 because there's what we don't see here in this discussion, another series coming down so to the taxpayer, it's not going to look like this. To the taxpayer, it's going to be.
If to the taxpayer, if we stop at Series A, this is what.
This is what it would look like.
But the plan is to issue Series B in 2 years. That's when we drop it down so we can layer it on top of it. And the plan for Measure PCC, and that's why we had another slide, I think it's slide 18 is the scenario we're currently looking at. That's why the team thinks it's important to, when we look at Series A, the structuring, not to just look at Series A and silo, but the whole program as a whole. Understanding that a lot of these assumptions may change as we move forward with projects and other things. But this is the current plan, and the plan is that we stay under $20 and get you 130 million and all the subsequent issuances. And so by 2030, you can access all 565. Is there a question?
Yeah, sorry, so this is kind of separate from that, so we're looking here at a 25-year max term, and that's just for Series A.
That's just for Series A, that's correct.
Okay.
So,
The instructor series A up to 40 years, that's the legal maximum, but we have never assumed that.
and I know next we're gonna talk about 30 years, so it would be helpful to get to 30 years, like the difference between the two, because at the end of the day, we're still going through to 30 years, so I think how that there's a difference, because it looks like on this chart that we're still gonna be repaying through the full 30-year term anyway.
Yes, so 2052 would be the final maturity of the measure PCC. That was the assumption when we were in the planning election process. So the team thought it's important to stay with those parameters, and you're correct. And based on some interest rate assumptions, we're not looking at a significant difference in when you compare the whole program.
Okay.
So, well, if we can go through some of the slides for the 30-year bond term, and we do have these important stats side by side between the two options, so we can look at the differences.
So before we go there,
Yes.
I'm gonna just ask one more super simple question that just gonna blow it all up. I'm a taxpayer, and in 2024, you're gonna assess me $20 for whatever, average $100 for me. In 2025, is there gonna be a new $20 per 100 assessment? Or is it the same assessment, just continuing forever?
So the tax rate is the same. Every year, they pay $20 per 100,000 of their assessed valuation. So if the person has to live in that house and it's assessed this year, so the base increase in their AV will be 2%. So they can expect, in terms of the dollar amount they pay next year, to reflect a 2% increase. So but every year, the county levies a new $20 per 100,000.
Okay, I still don't get it. So 2024, I look at my tax bill, and obviously they're all up by some percentage. Okay, I get that. But in addition to that, there's an additional, we'll call it $100. Pretend I live in an average house, which, by the way, I live in an average house.
Yeah.
So, I got an additional $100 bill in 2024.
Yes.
In 2025, is it gonna be $100 plus the county maybe went up 2% or 3%, so it's now 103? Or is it 203? It's 103.
Yes.
So this 20 is a one and done, a cumulative over 30 years. It's not a stepping.
No, it's
To a
not the
taxpayer.
second one. And that's also based on 3% growth in assessed valuation. So the whole entire district's AV would need to grow by 3%. Then if everything goes in accordance to the plan, it will be $20 per 100,000 plus some escalation for every year.
For 30 years, and I get the beautiful new PCC. Yeah, okay.
You're welcome.
And you left us with capacity to pass another bond in the future. Right?
Pass or sell?
Sell, to put another bond on the ballot for the voters.
To put another, so every new bond election has a new set of tax rates, legal tax rates that you can go under. So these will be paid by 2052, but you can go out legally. There's nothing stopping you from going out for another GO. But I think at the very outset of the program, that's why we're being very conservative in a lot of these assumptions. We want to make sure that conservatively, we reserve all your tax rate capacity for the future issuances, because you can get locked out from accessing future dollars. If, say, I project 10% AV growth and the actual came in much lower than that.
Is your
That's not what I'm talking
is your
about.
question that Series A?
That in 15 years, we see that we have spent prudently and made beautiful buildings, and we have a need
Right.
for something else.
Right.
And 15, 18 years from now, we would like to pass another
Right.
$500
It-
million bond.
Right, it's a fresh, like you say, it's a fresh tax rate.
It's fantastic, because we can go up to 2.5
That goes back to that capacity page you were talking about,
So
which obviously.
we have all options open to us.
And you'll see that, Trustee Silver, with our partners, you know, Santa Monica College, LACCD. So that is actually happening in Mount SAC. I think they're considering a bond going out again, and they've issued, you know, several bonds in recent years. So we can go back at that when at a point where we think it's the Board of Trustees believes that that's the direction that we want to go, because you would also have to authorize. But in the interest of time, I mean, it's 6:25. And I know that Rachel actually has a comparison slide between the 25 and the 30-year. I'm wondering if we can show that and then kind of walk through the questions, and then we can talk about next steps.
Great, thank you, Candace. So here's the comparison slide. So all the statistics you saw for the 25-year maximum bond term versus 30-year, we have listed them all here. And I think, as you can see, the final maturity or the bond term is about 4 years of difference. And when it comes to all-in TIC, the average blended interest rate for the borrowing, it's about 10 basis points. And that 10 basis points equate to roughly $9.6 million more in the overall net debt service if you never refinance the bonds and they live to their full 25 or 30-year maturity. And the average long-term tax rate, it's an important line to look at, because you may ask, why will we even think about a 30-year bond term? We have some pros and cons listed on a later slide, but this is a big reason. Because the roughly $1 per 100,000 of tax rate capacity or flexibility that you get to reserve by stretching out the bond term slightly. And the next slide has this same line item of comparison, but for the measured PCC program as a whole. Keep in mind, these are preliminary. It's built on a lot of assumptions of issuing bonds from now all the way to 2030. But you can see there's no significant difference when you compare these two options for the program as a whole.
Sorry, so just to confirm, the last slide was just for Series A,
Yes,
and then this slide is for all the series.
correct.
Okay. So did we see a difference for Series A of like 9.6
Yes,
million, but if we look at it within all the series, it's not that big of a difference at all?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Lastly,
And the 25-year max for all the series? Is that,
no,
or the
just
max for
for
Series A, even though I'm on the total here?
Yes,
Okay, and the reason there's so little difference goes back to your colorful chart with all the bars that keeps everything at
that's correct.
20. You're basically just shuffling
Shuffling how much.
the
tax
color
rate
of the bar
capacity.
that goes in which row. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Okay. And lastly, on the comparison chart, we just went through all the quantitative comparison, and this slide is the qualitative one. I want to reiterate the parameters because it's the same for both these options. That means it's the same $20 tax rate limitation. We're not going above it or making changes. It's the same 3% EV projection. It's the same issuance schedule of every 2 to 3 years. It's the same bond amount, 130 million, 145 for the subsequent issuance. Same final maturity for measure PCC. So no matter what bond term we structure or choose to structure for Series A, measure PCC, we thought it's important to have it stay in 2052, because that's what we model at the time we planned for measure PCC last year. Lastly, it's the same interest rate assumptions, right? Based on today's market and some average interest rate, 15-year average historical rate for the future issuances. And to talk about the pros and cons of these, right? You may ask, why are we even looking at different options? To state the obvious, the advantage for 25-year bond term is that lower interest cost for Series A, and you lock it in today. You know what it is, you lock it in today. This also presents no change from the prior modeling that we share with the board. The advantages for the 30-year bond term is the lower average tax rate for Series A, that about $1 per $100,000 of difference, because that will give you all the additional tax rate flexibility or capacity for future series. This is So not significant, but it's in the 6 digits, overall lower interest cost to measure PCC. So I won't review the disadvantages, they're directly inverse to the ones I just talked about. But it's really the tax rate capacity, and I think if we have certainties to all the assumptions that we made in the modeling, I certainly think lower interest costs and or the lower maximum bond term makes sense. But understanding we're at the very outset of implementing Measure PCC, and tax rate is your ceiling, it's your legal ceiling. That is an important consideration for accessing additional dollars from your Measure PCC authorization. That's why the team prepared the 30-year scenario to help share with the board so you can make an informed decision. And I think if you were to ask me or the team for our recommendation, I think you saw on the quantitative comparison slide for 10 basis points, but for the flexibility you get, given the current, the market environment, uncertainties in, when it comes to the real estate market value or inflations in general, you hear all that in the news. We think that flexibility in exchange of 10 basis points is worthwhile to consider. Nevertheless, both options are reasonable and conservative, and ones that we have implemented in the past and seen in the market often, but that is important to discuss with the board.
I think you said you're recommending 25.
30-year.
You're recommending the 30.
I was gonna ask her to just make sure she said that, just so it was clear for
You're
everyone.
recommending the 30-year, even though the colorful bar thing was a 25-year.
There was a separate slide that we didn't go through.
That had the 30-year bar thing. Got it. Okay.
This is the colorful one with the 30-year.
With the 30-year.
Red bar.
Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, we skipped that one. Okay.
But I think the thought is, given it's your first series of your measure, the most conservative thing to do is do the longer term, because there's $1 difference in the tax rate lower for the long-term stuff. Because what you don't want to do is maybe get to series D and we're squeezed out a little bit, right? Because maybe we have another 08, 9, and 10 type era, right? Where things just go so bad. And you can't project even 3% going forward. You project, because I've seen this when that period went on, was you project 0% for like 3-4 years. Like Mount Sac, they had the roughest time, right? They did a bond measure and then 9 months later, they couldn't access the money because they were so concerned about where property growth rates had gone. And so they had to do another structure to get past it, but we don't want to put you in that perspective, in that position. What we want to do is say, okay, what's the most conservative thing to do, given this is the first series? The most conservative thing to do is borrow a little longer. Therefore, we have a dollar's worth of tax rate room should something happen in the next several years. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be outstanding to maturity. You're going to spend the 9.7 million over 30 years. Because in the end, municipal bonds, the average life of municipal bonds is like 7 or 8 years. Sooner or later, you're going to refinance the things and shorten.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. You're always open to refinance.
That's correct. And
So you're recommending 30, and that's what you need this committee to vote on to recommend to full board? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Your recommendation, we wanted to make sure that we showed you 2 options. The first being what had originally been shown to the board when we did the original Measure PCC pieces and thought process. But this 30-year option really came onto the table after really great consultation from Trennis and Rachel, and we thought adding it and then making our recommendation to you all. And if you are supportive of that, we would ask that, one, we approve, that we give some approval for this team to continue to structure that using the 30-year option.
Okay, so that's where we are. What?
I'll move to recommend that.
Okay, well, there you go.
Second.
The 30 year.
Yeah,
So let's-
but
Let's look at the
Our-
comparison one more time, just so we are clear what we are
And if
recommending.
there are any questions, please let us know.
our tax cap is $25 per $100 of
That's
assessed value.
Yes.
So by going down, that gives us $6 wiggle room? Because right now we have 5,
Well,
right?
we put 20 in our.
But are we legally bound, or was that just a suggestion?
That's a tax rate estimate.
Yeah.
Mauricio can talk about the legal terms, but your legal limit is $25.
25,
25,
okay,
legally speaking.
okay.
But if we, in our bond, if we put on the ballot, we said 20.
We
Yeah.
suggest we get it as,
It's just
yeah,
a suggestion to the
Yeah.
taxpayers
And
that we've
you
made.
have to disclose an estimated tax rate.
So we can go higher than that if we absolutely needed to.
Right.
Yes.
If you had
To
to,
the
right.
legal limit.
To the limit.
So your point, Tammy, is that there's already a cushion built in because the 20 and the 20 to the 25. And therefore, the reason we're going 4-6 is to create a cushion, but we already have a cushion, I think is the point I'm hearing you say.
yes, and I mean, I'm gonna go with it, if we had stopped with the bond tranche, whatever, $9 million is, we can do a lot with that, but if after time,
The next
we're
one.
really only looking at $225,000 more for an additional 5 years. Still not quite getting it, but I'm gonna go with it. I'm not gonna ask for it, but, we'll do that because that's not much.
To me, it seems like, that dollar per 100K flexibility is what they're talking about. And I think I would like us to not go beyond what we suggested to voters. So it's a cushion, but that seems like we did the comfortable.
I think you made a really good point there, Alton, that, when we say 20, we should try to live by 20. We're not obligated to, things can happen, but to start out of the gate, we ought to be thinking 20.
Yeah, if we were doing Series C, we probably would be having this discussion over the options. But given it's the first series, and there's a lot of time between now and the last year, how long did it take you to issue the bonds from the 04 election? Was it?
It just was retired when I was on the board, so.
Right, so pretty recent, right? So it took a while. Now, I'm not saying this is gonna take that long, but still, if you have a long time and a lot can happen between now and the time you issue Series
You
D,
sure that math is right?
that
So
won't work.
it's built on interest rate assumptions,
Assumptions,
right? We're not using today's rates for building Series B, C, and D.
Right.
Same thing, we didn't use 2021 rates for building measure PCC. What we did, and it's explained in a footnote, but to explain it out loud, we looked at a historical 15-year historical average for interest rate for all of the year 1 to year 30 maturity that Trent has talked about. And we assume a single A credit rating, which is much lower than yours, to be conservative. So those are the same assumptions that we use for Series B, C, and D. Those could be much higher than what interest rates are in 2030 when we project to issue Series D, or they could be higher, lower, so we don't know. Those are assumptions that we make. But based on those assumptions, we came to the conclusion that the numbers, there's no significant difference for the program as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Motion is second.
Yeah, we got a motion in a second. Are you our minute taker for all this?
Armina is remote.
Oh, okay, great.
And
Good luck with
there's
that.
a timeline slide, Candace. Not sure if you want to go through
Yeah,
that.
I'm gonna speed through this because we did talk in good detail about we always like to help you all see where we're going. So we have that August 2nd, 3rd piece. So today was sort of our study session. We'll do this at the board meeting on the 15th. Our June, we will, Rachel and Trent has talked about, getting our credit ratings. We've been working on the presentations for that. We'll come back to you all in the June timeframe to do another review about sort of where we're at and all of the reviewing all of the documents that have to be prepared. We then go to the county in step 4, which is July 11th. And then that kicks off this real sort of fiscal, purchasing process where Trennis gets excited and he gets to go out there and sort of prepare the bonds in the market and pre-price and sale. It's super exciting. And then we have the post-sale actions, and then with our hope and goal to close that August 2nd and 3rd, so that we can prepay the COPs on August 3rd. So that sort of just takes you through where we're starting today, where we plan to be in August. We believe the timeline, you know, we worked with sort of the county. I know Trustee Silver, you had talked about, well, what's the county timelines and things like that. So we have tried to bundle in those pieces so that we can meet these dates. But in June, we'll give you any sort of, you know, understanding of where we're at, but we all feel confident with the timeline that you see before you.
Bottom line is Thursday, July 20th, right? Noon
Yeah, that's when the benchmark comes out is at noon, but we would be done by 10 a.m.
by 10. But it's Thursday, the 20th is the day where rates are sometime around
Right,
that day.
correct.
You have a lucky tie, Dennis?
I got a lot of them.
Do we need to vote on the,
We need to vote, and I'm just thinking about what you said about the very beginning about August. Anyway, your comment on who knows where the market and interest rates in August,
Mhm.
and here we are, August. Anyway, July, almost August. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye, and for clarity, it's the 30-year recommendation, right? You're looking at me like you have a
Yeah, but I
question.
just thought maybe you should say, because this is a significant
This,
thing.
okay, so I will say with emphasis, so I've been on this committee for 30 years. And most of the meetings were 311 cubes. And I knew what I was walking into today, because I've been through this meeting before. Not like I remembered a whole lot, obviously, but this is like the most, I mean, we do the audit, but this is probably in every decade to 2 decades, the most difficult and significant thing this committee does. If not, it's the most difficult, it's for sure the most difficult, at least in my opinion. So I think you guys did a great presentation. I think if I heard it, if I'm here 20 years from now for the next and the next, maybe I'll start to get it better. But, so I really appreciate it. I definitely appreciate a very specific recommendation, which for this one is the 30-year max term is what you've recommended and was moved and seconded that we were about to vote on. And this is why we have committees, because this would be very difficult in a full board presentation. So this is where we need to give comfort to our colleagues that we vetted this thing for 2 hours. There was some, you know, slight nuances in different terms and rates and things like that. And this is the committee's recommendation based on the recommendation of our management and professionals. Okay, how's that for giving it a
Outstanding.
build-up? So can we vote now?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
I
Aye. Okay, opposed? All right.
at 3-0 on the?
Passes 3-0. If you didn't quite get it, I should probably declare that. Thank you, Walton. Proposed meeting schedule. Our next meeting is supposed to be May 10th. And it just says 311Q there, but if there's something else, we will make sure that it's worth a meeting. Proposed future agenda items. Hearing this presentation again, maybe anyone? Oh, watch it
We'll be
on
back in June again.
Yeah. Say what?
I said, Trustee Martin, we'll be back. This topic will come back to that June meeting.
Okay. All right, then I think we stand adjourned. Thank you.